Okay, I've got it listed under best evidences because I found it a really helpful thing to convince people just by what's in the rocks. Okay, there's Australia. Here's one of our coal seams that I did some research in many, many years ago. Now, it's our big brown coal mines at Yallourn and Morwell. Lots of coal. In fact, we have coal seams that are 100 metres thick. I was explaining this to the Newcastle Coal Board, and they sort of looked at that and went, gulp. And then they said, now we know why we're going bankrupt. You've got hundreds of metres of coal in seams that are so thick. Okay, here's the story in one of your British museums. Peat, tropical swamps. You actually form huge layers of plant debris. Then given much time, given much pressure, given much heat, you will even form black coal. See peat, the stuff in the swamps, lignite, brown coal, black coal, after vast amounts of time. All right, there's another version of it. You have how coal was formed millions of years ago. They can't help it. Dead plant matter fell into swampy waters. Then thick layers of brown coal, peat, and then you mine the black coal, the really good stuff. Okay, there's another version. Changes in the rank of coal. It's very thick as peat, it's thinner as brown coal, and under lots of heat and pressure, it turns into bituminous black coal. Now, this is what's sold to the students in high school, in primary school, on the ABC, on the BBC, David Attenborough's story. This is National Geographic, this is university stuff. Okay, now look at that coal seam. Now, that's a decent thickness, layer after layer of coal, one of our big mines. But here's what I was in the mine to research. Do you see that big tree stump? Now, it's interesting. You see, I spent about a week in this mine before the mine geologist came and talked to me. I guess I was allowed in because I had friends in administration. Normally, you have trouble if you're a known creationist getting into coal mines. But let's tell you the results of this. This coal seam is full of huge pine trees. Amazing. And lots of slushy black stuff. What's found in it? Brown pine, Norfolk Island pine, Queensland kauri, Huon pine, celery top pine. Now, I'll be brutally blunt with you. I live in Australia. I know all of those trees. We've planted all of them at Jurassic Ark. And there's one thing we know about them. They don't like their feet getting wet at all. Did you catch that? You won't find these growing in swamps. Even near the coast, they'll grow high up out of the reach of the salt water or the swampy water. They don't grow in swamps. Key point. All right. Here's the bottom of the top coal seam. 100 metres of coal above us. Eat your heart out, British coal miners. 100 metres of brown coal. You see my ruler there for scale? It sits immediately on a clay layer. Now, the interesting thing about this brown coal, there's not much clay in it, but there's beautiful clay between the layers. And we had a good conversation. The geologist and I, you see, there's a pine tree. You're looking at a fossil pine tree just there. There's the brown coal, which is mostly brown muck. It burns. You're not allowed to drive your vehicle through there unless it's got special exhaust suppressors, so there's not a chance of the seam gas catching fire. Did you catch what I said? Gas leaks out of this. The powder, the dust, when it dries, is totally flammable, dangerous place. But it sits straight on the clay. And as I said to the guy, I said, tell me, do we find any dirt in here that the plants would have grown in? No. I said, well, how did they get here? And he basically didn't know the answer to that. Okay, when you get close up, you can see the coal bits of bark. You can see the crushed up bits of debris that are brown pine. And what you'll also find is it's got kauri gum. It's got pine gum in it. So we know exactly what sort of trees they are. What can you find? In addition, you find silky oak. You find New Zealand red beech. You find silver beech, casuarina. I've seen them all. Okay. Anybody know anything about most of those trees? Craig, I could ask you on the spot, but I won't. You see, the top four, the top three don't grow in swamps at all, won't grow anywhere near them. The bottom two, Well, I've got a swampy backyard at the moment, and I've got both casuarina and banksia growing just up out of the wet soil. Not in the wet soil, they'll go up on the dry bits, but they have a little bit of swamp tolerance. Now, did you realize that if you find all of those trees mixed together, then you have dry land trees, non-swamp trees, and a little bit of wet trees? Mixed environment, not buried environment on the spot. All of these things have been washed in. How long have we known this? I thought when I was in the coal mine I was finding something great. No, we've known this since 1927. And I know now why I didn't get this reference in university, because my professor at the end of the first week said we're not going to discuss any such rubbish as creation or Noah's flood. And he was adamant that coal formed slowly in a swamp. Now, we've known that that couldn't have been possible at this coal mine since 1927, and it's been totally ignored. Araucarians are not bog plants, and the only reasonable explanation of their presence in coal deposits is their having been waterborne from some more or less distant site. Even when you have a look at our famous Newcastle coal seams, the first major expert on said these plants have all been washed in. Wow. Let's go to another place where you can find big coal seams that are brown coal. Now, if you've never been to Germany, you're not familiar with their brown coal seams, they have heaps of brown coal. Look at that. Can you see the layers in it, by the way? Get up a bit closer and you'll see it's full of tree stumps. What's unusual about these tree stumps? In 1927, the conclusion was these were washed into brown coal in Australia. How about in Germany? All right, so brown coal, Germany. It's got sequoias, California redwoods. These are highland dry ground trees, not swamps, so we know what they are. And secondly, we also know that's how they show up. You notice that the roots are all busted. They're stacked one on top of the other at all angles. These trees were washed in, destroyed and washed in. Now, go one last example here in New Zealand. Now, I've always wanted to play with one of these machines, and I came across a farmer who owned a coal mine, and he was a Christian. And I said, can I enjoy this? So for the first time in my life, I got to really dig up coal. What was famous about this coal mine? A, it was brown coal. B, it didn't have much clay in it. C, you had to make sure your machines were fully suppressed so no sparks could get out, because otherwise the gas would catch on fire. But the most interesting thing is the trees were so well preserved, he would sell them for furniture. Yeah, beautiful antique furniture on the spot. Magnificent. Quite a deep hole as well. Can you see the brown coal? Can you see the shelves he's been using? Look, you get close up and you can see the trees. You notice something? Any of you who've walked up mountain streams know one thing. The angle of the rocks in the stream, the angle it's pointing down, tells you which way the water was flowing. You see, if the water in this one was flowing from left to right, and left side of your screen to the right side, it would flip over those logs that are all at an angle. This has been a stream bed. This has been a flood bed. Or if the water was coming from right to left, it would just aerodynamically flow over that piece of wood and leave it exactly where it was. So you find that in a mountain stream, the downward side always points upstream. Even the logs, the stumps, have an angle to them. This is a mega flood deposit. Look at that. Incredible. Did they tell you that at school, even about brown coal? Or did they tell you about peat bogs? Peat bogs? I'm sorry, but the Araucaria don't grow in peat bogs. Neither do the California redwood, which are found here in New Zealand. Amazing. Wow, look at some of the angles. The angles tell you how fast the water was going. So despite the professor, despite the theory, despite the so-called stories in museums, we know it simply can't be true in New Zealand. It can't be true in Germany. It can't be true in Australia. Back in 1927, the official view of the Geological Survey of New Zealand is that the coals are sedimentary of transport origin. What? 1927? That was their official view. We've had a lot of propaganda since then in the museums. Well, here's a modern catastrophic flood log deposit. We're in the north of the islands north of Australia. See the house covered in logs? There was a storm. The whole mountainside collapsed. Between the base of the mountain and the village, only a kilometre or so away, that the water moving rapidly had sorted everything. The soil fell out, the stones fell out, and finally you end up with these logs shipped into what's going to become a brown coal deposit. And you're right, there's no clay in it. Sooner or later, it will become an explosive area. How do we know that? Well, you see, brown coal is found in huge flood-formed deposits around the globe. But some of the other deposits of organic material that we've made, in fact, you can turn me back on now after they read this one, creationresearch.net. They can go to QA or fact file, search flood, arc, coal, etc.,